Hi folks, welcome once again to a Gaz Labs short video. I thought today I'd answer a couple of questions, and I've been asked a couple of times what do I need to get started in basic electronics. Well, you don't need very much. So what I thought I'd do is I'd answer the question what you need to get started. Then what I'd do is I'd show you some nice things to have which are very useful and actually are important, but they're kind of like the second stage. But then I thought I'd show you, say, the third stage, which will get you a little more advanced and sort of testing some, maybe fault finding or something like that, help you fault find. So let's get started. But before we do, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to 558 subscribers now, and I'm so made up. Honestly, I think it's fantastic. It's really good fun. I'd like to get to the 1,000, so if you haven't subscribed, then please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. Doing a video, then great. That's excellent. So let's get stuck into what it is that you need to get started in kit building or electronic kit building. So the first thing you're going to need, I think, is a soldering iron. Now this one is an Antex soldering iron, and what I've done here is, I think if I just get that away from there, can I get it out of there? Yeah, and gosh, it's got a bit caught up with the cable. Right, you're going to need one of those. That's a luxury. These come with a hook normally, and you can hook them on things. Don't recommend that because they get knocked off, and these are cheap off of eBay. So or wherever you get your Antex soldering iron from, you can normally get one of these things, and what you do is that just goes in there like so. So that is your basic thing. I think that's basic plus, and that will get you started with kit building. But you're going to need solder, and for the Americans out there, I think you call it solder. I don't know, it's a very weird way. It's got an L in it. Right, there you go. Thick one, thin one. This stuff, the thick one, you're likely to get from pretty much anywhere, B&Q, home base, wherever it might be. I don't know, wherever you get solder from, wherever. RS Components, CPC, they all do solder. But majority of the time, if you're out and about, you'll see this stuff, thick one, normally lead free. I don't recommend lead free. Sorry, just when you've touched it, don't lick your fingers or lick no, don't do that. These are all leaded varieties. They flow nicely. It's really quick, really easy, and it's much better. But you can, if you're really that way inclined, you can, if you want, use lead free. That's absolutely fine, and certainly in the professional world you probably would anyway, because of the some of the regulations now. So right, we've covered soldering iron, solder, and what else you're going to need? You're going to need a multimeter. Now this is basic stuff, okay? So this is about £12 from somewhere, B&Q, wherever, home base again, off the internet, eBay, 12 quid, really cheap. Just one thing about, or a couple of things about multimeters. You're probably going to want one that goes up to about 600 volts. Here in the UK it's typically 220, 240 volts mains. That's the highest voltage you're likely to come across in a general kit build. So if you're building like I did, I built myself a power supply, and I was down here somewhere when I was about 10 years old. So obviously the highest voltage in that was 220 volts or 240 volts. So you really want sort of something that is going to cope with that just in case, and you want to be able to measure sort of a bit lower down as well. You're also going to need to measure impedance, so it needs to have a good sort of ohms range on there as well. They're the basic functions, so you want sort of AC DC volts and an impedance or ohms measurement on there. Now some, like this one, come with a transistor tester as well, so you can insert the pins of your transistor in there and it will tell you whether or not it's functional or not. Personally, I don't use that. I'll tell you why a bit later on, but that was no use to me whatsoever. However, there was something that one of the meters had that has been very useful to me over the years, and I'll show you now. In this one, again, this was a very cheap one. This one came from Maplin. This is a precision gold, and that doesn't mean to say that it's anything special. It was about 20 quid on offer. It's got AC DC range on it. It's got all that sort of stuff, but it also has here, it has two down here. We can see this. I'll get it all unraveled for you. It's got the transistor tester again, which I don't use, but the bit that I do use quite a lot, and I have done, is here, which is basically will give you capacitance sort of testing. Now I used that when I was building airspace capacitors, and that gave me some guide of just where I was going, and I was building tuned circuits, because primarily over the last few years I've been playing with RF, and that has been very useful because I've made my own capacitors. There are some more advanced ones. You can start. You can spend £1,000 on a multimeter, or you can spend a tenner. I've got one here, which again is a big screen one. This is a Uni-T. This one was probably, I would say, getting on for £50 to £100. You know, again, it's got nothing fancy on this one, but it does have quite a lot of range on here for impedance and power. But it's also got what else has it got on it? Has it got anything good on it? It's got amps on it as well. Yeah, it's all right. It's a nice meter. It's got a diode tester on it and continuity tester. Nice bit of kit. Very, very useful. Right, so what have we covered so far? Right, so you've built your kit, okay, you've got your soldering iron, you've got your solder, and you've got a piece of test equipment so you can check for continuity across the board or whatever. But then you're going to need to power it up and start to test whether or not it actually functions. And what I would suggest to anyone is, if you start with one stage of a circuit and then start building on that one stage. So for instance, if you've got like a power circuit, then what you would do is you'd install a few components. Okay, start in building up that part of the circuit, and once you get to a certain stage, then test it to make sure that it's doing as you expect, and then build the second stage of the circuit, you know, on the board. So you're going to need a power supply. Now somewhere around here I've got one. Now there's two things you can do. Okay, I'll start with the cheapest way first, and see exactly what I did. Well, there's three things you can do. Let me go down here as well. Number one, okay, I started out with using batteries. That is probably the easiest, most convenient way. However, you can supply quite a lot of current with a battery, believe it or not. What I would suggest is that you maybe put a light bulb or something, a small light bulb, a torch bulb in line, so that if there's a dead short, then the light bulb will illuminate, and you can use Ohm's law. And I hope that you've all been practicing Ohm's law. You can calculate with the wattage of the bulb and the voltage that is actually, you know, being used, that you can calculate what the current on the circuit will be absolute max. And you want to sort of set it, you know, fairly low, so that you can just start testing bits and pieces, so things, you know, read out what they should, rather than, you know, be a dead short, that, you know, sort of something being able to supply an amp or so, and then your circuit is turns to smoke. Now if you're not using batteries, then you can use these things. Okay, and this is a wall wart. Now what I would say with these is that if you wander down to, say, the boot sales, or you know, junk stores, charity shops, all those sort of things, they've all got these things, and they put them in a box and they will sell them for 20 pence. I mean, really, 20p. And you can get these in ranges of like 9 volts, 5 volts, 3 volts. You know, I've seen them as high as 24 volts, even 30 volts. You can get these, they'll give you about an amp, okay, and they're cheap, and this will get you started. But again, you want to use the little light bulb trick, or just work out some way of limiting current if you can. Now, the next stage up from that, when your kit building has got to a certain stage where you're quite confident, and you're starting to get a little bit better, then what you can do is you can build your own stuff. Now, when I was 10 years old, I built this. This is a power supply again. What I've done on this one is, you can just see on there, I think I've actually taken my multimeter and I've written on there whereabouts, when I turn that, what voltage it is, and the maximum voltage I can get out of that is 22 volts. And at the time that was good enough for me. Over the years, it's a bit like Trigger's broom, it's actually, you know, it's changed, it's become slightly safer. Over the years, I did make a proper circuit board for it. I put some safety features in it, like overheat sensors and that sort of stuff, and made sure it was all grounded internally. So yeah, there's a few things you can do like that. The next stage is that was what I would call the things that we discussed so far. I would say are pretty basic things, okay, there. And then the second sort of part of that, when we talked about power supplies, they're kind of like they're basic, but they're just, you know, they're the next sort of stage of basic. All right, but then there's a little more you can do. For instance, you can move up to purpose-made lab power supplies, and you don't need to spend a huge amount of money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera around, and we're going to have a look and see what's on my desk, and I'll talk you through what I've got there. So see you in a second. Okay, so what have I got on my desk? Well, what I'll do is I'll start with the more basic of the bits of kit, and they are the two power supplies. When I sort of said to you about putting a light bulb in circuit, just to try and limit a current, then these are sort of like these are a little more upmarket. What you can do with these, you can set the voltage, and you can with the top button there, and you can set the current, so that you can sort of like, if you're building a project, and you know, as you build it, you know, you want to make sure that it's not drawing sort of too much, and make sure it's all good. Now down the bottom here, I've actually got one running. Now you'll see, if I just get rid of this junk, here, if you press the voltage button here, you can then change the voltage. Okay, and let's get rid of that, it's in the way. So many cables. Right, so yeah, so when you do that, you can press that and you can change the voltage. Now this one will go up to 31 volts, but it will go down as low as 1 volt, or maybe even less. You can go down even less than 1 volt. Okay, but I typically use these things at about 5 volts, because I typically do that sort of stuff. So, and again here you can limit the current. You can see here, look, that's 1.3 amps, and this will go all the way up to 3 amps. And what that actually does is that if the current's exceeded, then it turns the power supply off, the output is cut. Now the one up on the top here is a cheap Maplin one. This would have been about 80 to 100 quid, I think, when they were new. I bought both of these are eBay specials. Okay, they both come off eBay. They're both used, and yeah, they're just cheap power supplies, but they're very, very useful. They kind of double up as a piece of test equipment, as well as you know, a piece of useful sort of lab equipment. What else have I got here? Now my favorite toy, I think, and is my Rigol 1054 scope, 4-channel scope. This is a 50 meg scope. It's a useful addition to the lab, but it's not the best one. I would have liked to have got sort of something a little more exciting, but this was cheap. It was about 300 quid. It does an awful lot, and I can upgrade it a little bit with one of the firmware hacks, which I haven't been brave enough to do yet, but I might. And that will take it up to 100 megs. Really, really useful bit of kit. Great for building things like pulse width modulating power supplies, or you know, controllers, LED controllers, and that sort of stuff. And that's where it sort of comes into its own. My only grumble with this is it's quite noisy, so I'll turn it off. The other thing that I've got here, this is an arbitrary waveform generator. This is fairly new to me. I saw it on eBay, and I thought, shall I, shan't I? Maybe I'll give it a go. I'll get one of those. It's useful for test and sort of driving sort of bits and pieces, but again, it is quite noisy. And that one there is what I would call sort of luxury. So for me, so far we've sort of covered a little roundup. We've covered the soldering iron, the test meter, which are very basic. Then the sort of next basic stage, we looked at the cheap power supplies, batteries, whatever, powering your new kit. And then obviously the next sort of advanced sort of stage on basic would be like a proper lab power supply, which doubles up as a piece of test equipment, because you can see what current it's drawing at whatever voltage and that sort of stuff. So that's all very useful. And again, you can do the same with that one. Again, second-hand purchases. But then my sort of big luxury thing, which isn't overly important but it is very useful, is my oscilloscope, and I do love that. I love it a lot, and Rigol are a really good make, good bang for buck stuff. But my ultimate luxury toy is the arbitrary waveform generator, and again, that has limited use. So that is my shack, or my lab equipment. And so let me spin the camera back round again, bear with. So yeah, well, I hope that was not too boring, but you know, those were the basic bits and pieces. And as I say, I showed you my oscilloscope and stuff like that, which I think are probably more advanced and you're not likely to get really into in the first instance. There are a few things that you can upgrade to as well, that again, as I've gone round, say, boot sales or radio or electronic fairs, I've kept my eye out for things like these a better soldering iron, and the advantage over this is a 40-watt iron, and it's temperature controlled, so it's doesn't blow your components up. It's always set at just enough to deal with your solder. But I've also picked up much nicer soldering irons as well, which are like, you know, £400 or £500 worth, to be honest. These little pencil irons. This is sort of something that was busted, and I've managed to get cheap and then bring it home and repair it. You know, a little bit of due diligence and all that sort of stuff. It was fairly straightforward to fix. So, you know, there's lots of things that you can do to keep the cost down, and you know, as you get more and more comfortable, advanced and all that sort of stuff. But then overall, okay, the one thing that you're going to need, okay, and it will come with time, and that is a junk box. You can see behind me here, this here, so that is my junk box. I'm embarrassed to say, down the side here also you'll see there's some drawers. They contain components that I've been given, bought, overspill from kits, whatever, and they all go in there, and there's literally those drawers are full with small components. I need to sort them out at some stage. In the tubs behind here is just bits and pieces that I've taken. They're basically component pulls from bits and pieces, cables, anything, power supplies. You know, I said about these wall warts, you know, getting them for 20p from a boot sale. You know, recently I built a small kit which I did the video on, which was the bias T. Yeah, a small kit that I designed and put into, you know, semi-production. And again, that's somewhere else where you can go. So once you've done all that sort of stuff, you can learn to use the software online, and maybe in the future I'll talk about that. But you can use the software and then generate your own little boards from circuits you can get off the interweb, which is a brilliant resource for bits and pieces. But I use a 20p wall wart that I got from a boot sale to power these, and then we've been receiving satellite signals from the new geostationary satellite. So again, you know, it's really, it's good fun. It's a great hobby, and yeah, so there you go. But it does mean you get a lot of junk, okay. But it seems a shame to sort of throw this stuff away, and it does sort of build up, and eventually you start collecting multimeters as well, like myself. I've got about 7 there, I think. But yeah, so there you go. You don't need much. You know, the basic bits will get you through. Anyway, I hope that you've not been too bored listening to me waffle on about this stuff, and I hope that the questions have been answered that were sent in. So just leaves me really to say thank you very much for watching. Thank you again for subscribing if you've made it this far into the video, and next time I will be building something, but I don't quite know what yet. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.